to please make housekeeping announcements for this webinar.
Dear all, my name is Alexandra. I'm going to briefly explain some of the technical features of today's call. This webinar is being recorded. There is the International Sign Interpretation, captioning in English, and language interpretation in Bengali, Nepali, and Urdu. If you need captions in the external window, the link will be added in the chat box. The interpretation button on the bottom of your screen, presented as a globe, will allow you to access specific language channel. Please choose your channel that you will follow throughout the meeting. The participants do not have the option of opening the microphone and video. Should you have any questions, kindly leave them in Q&A section. We request all speakers to kindly keep to times and keep their cameras off if not speaking. We are asking you that you speak slow enough for the interpreters and captioners to follow. Thank you all and have a good meeting.
Thank you, Alexandra. My name is Gayatri Shekhar, and I work with the IDA Secretariat as a Senior Officer for Learning and Community Engagement. A few words about this webinar before we begin with our esteemed panelists. This webinar has 4 major objectives. We would want to inform and engage organizations of persons with disabilities, working both at national and subnational levels on the Global Disability Summit process. Through our panelists, we would like to showcase some of the key best practices and interventions by OPDs addressing critical issues using the GDS mechanism. We would like to highlight the role played by youth with disabilities in the GDS mechanism and share best practices for youth representation. And really, we hope that through our discussions today, we're able to encourage our participants to engage in the GDS process and share the view that the GDS is an ongoing engagement with regional summits, online events, making and tracking commitments, and contributing meaningfully. We will begin with our first speaker. I welcome Greta Gamberini, Manager of the GDS Secretariat. Greta provides ongoing leadership to the GDS Secretariat, coordinating and overseeing all GDS-related activities, managing partnerships, advocacy efforts, and operational activities, alongside stakeholder parties involved in a GDS cycle. He has over 5 years of experience working in disability inclusive development and has previously worked with the European Disability Forum and ADD International. Over to you, Greta.
Thank you so much, Gayatri, and thank you for all of you for being here today and listening to us talk about the Global Disability Summit. I will take the next 10 minutes or so to talk about what the Global Disability Summit is, and I will try to really frame the interventions and the conversations that will come after me. As Gayatri mentioned, we really want to use these opportunities to reflect on the level of participation and lessons learned from previous GDS cycles, and also to come up with some concrete suggestions and actions moving forward and as we approach April 2025. Jumping into what the Global Disability Summit is, we are looking at a mechanism that has the objective to advance the rights and the level of inclusion of persons with disabilities around the world. The goal for the summit in 2025 is to use the momentum, the noise created by the Global Disability Summit to ensure that international development cooperation further focuses on the rights of persons with disabilities. And we also want to take this moment to critically look at the achievements of 2018 and 2022 and come up with solutions and identify gaps in what has been done so far. As I mentioned, the first Global Disability Summit was held in 2018 in London, and it served as a moment of inspiration for a variety of stakeholders to truly and critically think about disability inclusion and reinforce where it was already present their commitment to disability inclusive development. The second Global Disability Summit happened in 2022, and it was held virtually due to COVID-19 restrictions. And while I think we can all agree that it was less impactful than the summit in 2018, the GDS in 2022 managed to prompt disability rights lens to be applied to two areas that previously were not receiving enough attention, and these areas were health and climate change. Looking at 2025, the next Global Disability Summit will be held in Berlin on April 2nd and 3rd. And it will be preceded by a civil society forum, which is going to be held on April 1st, 2025. The event will be held at an event venue located right in the center of the city of Berlin. When we look at the GDS in 2025, we think it is specifically important in relation to past cycles of the Global Disability Summit, mainly because of three elements. The first element is that of national ownership. The Global Disability Summit 2025 aims to ensure that governments lead on disability inclusion and work on strengthening partnerships and building partnerships more effectively than before. And in practice, this concept has been translated in how the commitments mechanism, of which I will talk about in a minute, has been reshaped, allowing for discussions on the commitments platform and promoting the idea of submission of joint commitments. And we can also see this effort in strengthening partnerships and national ownership of the GDS mechanism in how many events we are trying to hold before the summit and connected to the summit, such as this webinar that we're having today, but also several regional summits. The second element that's specifically important to the GDS in 2025 is that of concrete and actionable commitments. For this cycle, we are calling for pledges to achieve real progress and for pledges that look at understanding and addressing gaps that are specifically relevant for a region or a certain target group. During the course of this webinar, we will hear from several speakers about their experience and recommendations when it comes to engagement of organizations of persons with disabilities in the commitments process. And also in whether or not they think that commitments submitted in 2018 and 2022 were reflective of the actual needs of persons with disabilities. The third element is that of the Global Disability Summit Declaration. The declaration that's being worked on among the Global Disability Summit co-hosts will be a political document with the concrete objective of ensuring the implementation of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, with a particular focus on the area of international development cooperation. Some of the key elements so far of the declaration include stressing that disability inclusion has to be mainstreamed in all activities and on all levels of development cooperation. It includes language on ensuring that development cooperation is viewed from a Global South perspective, and highlights the need for concrete efforts from Global North countries. When it comes to the topics and objectives of the next Global Disability Summit, we are shaping these based on a series of consultations that the International Disability Alliance has run in the past 2 years. And that I know some of you attending today have participated in. The consultations aimed at understanding what OPD priorities would be going into the Global Disability Summit and what they would be interested in seeing the Global Disability Summit focus on. The team at the International Disability Alliance compiled and presented the findings in a report. And based on the report, the co-hosts have identified 4 pillars under which we are now working to highlight different topics and based on which we are trying to shape the program of the Global Disability Summit. The 4 pillars that were identified were those of number 1, non-discrimination, equality, and participation. Number 2, accessibility. Number 3, situations of crisis and conflict. And number 4, social and economic rights. So at this stage, we're looking at the pillars to finalize the priority topics that would then be informing the program of the Global Disability Summit and the different panels that we will have during the Global Disability Summit. Looking at concluding my remarks, I would also like to go back to all of the different events that we are organizing and that we are planning before and after the GDS. And all of these events really aim to address 3 objectives. The first objective is to have regional or thematic specific conversations. Because of its nature, the GDS is a global gathering, and it would then be unrealistic to say that during the course of 2 days, we will be able to cover all topics of relevance for the entire world. And we are then promoting the organization of regional events or thematic events. At this stage, one regional summit has already taken place. It happened in Nairobi, and it was led by the African Disability Forum with the support of the International Disability Alliance and the government of Germany. The regional summit has as an outcome document a very strong call to action that we're finalizing and will soon be able online. We will also be holding a regional summit for Latin America and one for the Arab region, happening respectively in early December and the first week of November. And we're also planning to have a regional summit for North America, for Asia Pacific, and for Central Asia. We're working on the final organizational aspects of these last 3 regional summits that I mentioned, so I hope to have more information for you soon. The second aspect of all of the events that we are organizing is that to identifying and advocating for the submission of commitments that are needed specifically within certain regional contexts. And this is also something we will be working on today. And then finally, as Gayatri was mentioning, the last objective would be that of promoting participation of OPDs and promoting the concept that OPDs should be involved in every phase of the Global Disability Summit, from the very planning stages, such as hosting pre-events, participating in consultations, speaking at different events and webinars, through the delivering of several activities, such as actively advocating for the submission of commitments. And on this point, we will soon be sharing with you an advocacy toolkit that can be used to talk about the Global Disability Summit and that can be used to advocate for governments to be engaged in the Global Disability Summit. And finally, in the submission and monitoring of commitments. So having said this, Gayatri, I'll stop here and I'll give the floor back to you. And again, thank you so much for having me here.
Thanks, Greta. Thank you, and I think it's a great way to start with understanding the 4 pillars of GDS for 2025. It really sets the tone for the action-focused way in which the mechanism proceeds. And thank you for sharing information about the regional summits. Just to recall, we're having 2 regional summits coming up, one for Latin America, one for Arab region in November, and one for Latin America in December. Is that correct? So thank you for sharing that information as well. And I'm sure everybody is looking forward to the advocacy toolkit as well. On that note, I would like to invite our next speaker, Mr. Arman Ali. Arman Ali is a leading advocate for disability rights in India with over 20 years of experience. He has advised several ministries in India, including the Election Commission, the National Human Rights Council, and UNESCO's 2019 State of Education Report for India. An alumnus of the US Department of State's IVLP and Oxford University's Public Policy Leadership Program, Arman drives systemic change for disability inclusion. In 2021, he launched the Javed Abidi Fellowship for Youth with Disabilities, a first in South Asia. His 2022 efforts pushed for universal healthcare insurance for persons with disabilities. Recently, his work secured disability inclusive commitments in major political party manifestos in India. Thank you for being here, Arman, and over to you.
Thank you, Gayatri. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And I think very well established and explained by Greta about the four pillars of GDS and how it is so important to have organizations of persons with disabilities in the entire shaping up of the Global Disability Summit 2025. I think NCPDP is also an OPD where my majority of my board of trustees are persons with disability themselves. I am a person with lived experience, and I'm putting it on record because it's important that all people with disability at all level have a seat on the table. And I must emphasize the role of youth with disabilities, particularly in a country like India and the global south, where there's a huge population of young people with disability, has the power and the capacity to bring forth the issues, the grassroots issues of persons with disability. And not only that they come with the issue and create an activism or activity or advocacy around it, they are coming out with a solution of it. The new approach towards disability, which is I have experienced firsthand through the fellowship that we run for youth for disabilities in India. I have about 25 fellows who are all persons with disability from across the country. They are working on various issues, which is intersectionality with disability and other sectors, and also specific to disability needs, something as specific as and non-negotiable as accessibility. Or you talk about the new discourse around climate justice, equal participation, accessible tourism, data. And one of the most critical thing that we have been leading from the last 6 months, particularly because of the elections that India had in 2024 in the month of June, political participation of people with disability. One of the pillars of the GDS 2025, where we're talking about equality, non-discrimination, and participation. This cannot happen without political participation of persons with disabilities. Persons with disabilities have to have a seat on the table, and they cannot continue to remain an afterthought and something which you do as a housekeeping. In the last 1.5 year or so, we have been monitoring and working very closely with OPDs in India to gather support and voice out concerns of people with disabilities around access to education, access to employment, access to transport, access to any information or product or service. And irony is that we do not see a political will in giving people with disability an equal participation in all the scheme of things. So some of my fellows who have the opportunity. They had spoken, some of them spoke in the GDS 2022, as it was virtual, and they continue to work at the ground level to bring out data and the real narratives of disabled people, which is beyond what the governments or the political parties think. It is not something which you could limit to a social security or an affirmative action. A large population of people with disability continues to remain invisible due to lack of data. And this data just cannot only be disability specific. We have to look at the data around persons with disability in a more intersectional way. And if we want to change the narrative around disability, particularly in the global south, I personally believe that this has to be led by youth with disabilities. They have the solutions, they have the experience of living in the grassroots, in the rural areas, in difficult circumstances. Large part of the population get affected by conflict, by disaster, by every year, and these experiences needs to be put on the table by the youth with disability themselves, by organizations of persons with disability themselves. And I think GDS 2025 would be a huge opportunity for us to shape the future of millions of people with disabilities who are living across the global south and other parts of the world. As Article 32 of the CRPD, it talks about the international cooperation. The GDS, we can see the best international practices around bringing on board and cooperations by the state parties in promoting participation of organizations of persons with disabilities into decision making, into shaping what looks like the future. So I would reiterate that the role of organizations of persons with disabilities in impacting in the Global Disability Summit 2025 is huge, and particularly those organizations led by youth with disability who are talking about climate justice, who are talking about non-discrimination, equal participation, and and taking accessibility beyond a physical infrastructure, beyond the transport system to product, services, information. Some of the best practices can come through the international cooperation, and GDS 2025 is a huge opportunity, and we look at playing a very crucial part and important part in taking these concerns forward and ensure that the voices of disabled people from all over the world are heard and are part of the call to action. I'll stop it here. Back to you, Gayatri.
Thank you, Arman. It's indeed very valuable to remind ourselves and speak about in this forum of how the Global Disability Summit is a mechanism for international cooperation, and it really does play this pivotal role in bringing OPDs into the process of shaping the future, like you so eloquently put it. Thank you so much. So right now, we would like to open the floor for some questions, because I can see some hands up. And in fact, we already have a question. So I encourage our participants to please use the Q&A box. The Q&A box is at the bottom of the screen, and it can be used to enter any questions that you may have. So for due to administrative constraints, difficulties, we are not able to simply open the mic for everybody. So I please request you to use the Q&A box. I see that, we have hands raised in the audience, but I request you to please use the Q&A box. And I'm going to read out the first question that we have, and perhaps Greta, would you be able to answer it for us? We have a question from Kamran Rafiq, and he says, in countries of South Asia, if organizations and NGOs which are registered but not working directly on disability rights, what can we do? And where do we contact to support, where do we contact as a disabled candidate? Who can support? So this is the question. The question is, how do NGOs that don't directly work on disability participate?
Thank you so much, Gayatri. I'm trying to start my video and I'm having issues. Here you go. Thank you so much. Absolutely, there's several ways in which this can be done. First of all, I should have specified the Global Disability Summit in Berlin is open to anyone, not just to organizations of persons with disabilities and organizations strictly working on disability rights. We actually highly welcome having organizations which focuses may not be on inclusion of persons with disabilities at the Global Disability Summit. We are actually in touch with several organizations, disability inclusion. I'll put our email in the box, and if you would like to receive the toolkit that we're working on, which also have broad messaging from the perspective of INGOs and civil society, I would be happy to share it with you. Thanks, Gayatri.
Thanks, Greta. We have lots more questions suddenly, and I please welcome all our panelists to jump in and answer. The next question is from someone who says, "Hi, thank you for the informative presentation. How can disability organizations and OPDs at the grassroots level benefit from the GDS? And how can they engage?" I welcome anyone on the panel to answer this question. Mr. Arman, if you would like to answer, since you just spoke about OPD engagement.
Gayatri, can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, the question is, how can disability organizations and OPDs at the grassroots level benefit from the GDS, as well as how can they engage?
I think Greta would be the best to kind of answer this question, but I must share my experience. This GDS is also an online event. Virtually, people can participate, see what's happening, what are the thematic area that they are focused on, and this regional conferences, when they happen at different geo level, and like this one, we are able to participate from across the globe. Those who are interested. The similar exercise will be on, and people would be able to communicate with the GDS Secretariat and organizations of OPDs like us, and we'll be happy to share any information or thought that we have.
Thank you so much. And that's one of the main objectives, is for us to be able to showcase some of the practices that have worked. And thank you so much for offering to share those resources, Arman. Greta, would you like to add anything to how can grassroots level OPDs participate as well as benefit.
Thanks so much, Gayatri, and absolutely. And I think it also will be interesting to hear from panelists later on during the program. I think actually quite a few of them will touch upon these questions. We are, as I mentioned, looking at different levels of participation, and if we look strictly at attending the Global Disability Summit I shouldn't have said different levels, I should have said different ways of participating. If we're looking at the Global Disability Summit event in Berlin, we are finalizing a call for submission of nominations to be funded to attend the Global Disability Summit. IDA has been granted funding for OPDs and OPD representatives to attend the GDS, and we would like to ensure that as part of the criteria for the selection of the nominees, we include a specific quota for representatives of grassroots organizations and informal networks. So that's one way. As Gayatri mentioned, we're also organizing quite a lot of online events before the summit, and throughout these we're hoping to collect different views and different opinions on what needs to be done when it comes to commitments and setting of priorities. And I know this was also a methodology applied throughout the GDS consultations. Thanks, Gayatri.
Thanks, Greta. I'm just going to, just due to time constraints, we have lots of questions and we will try to respond to them on the Q&A box as well as try to discuss them in the forum. However, please know that if you have very specific questions, we are taking down all of the questions and we can get back to you with specific responses and resources as well as needed. We have a question that talks about, that asks about funding, on understanding what kind of, so 1 second, yeah. Is there funding for Global South OPDs that are not members of IDA? That's a question that I think that someone has asked. We have a question on regional summits from Elizabeth Ewan. Elizabeth, we are going to have more regional summits, as Greta mentioned. We have the ones for Latin America and for the the MENA region planned for November and December. I think the other ones, we don't have dates yet. Is that correct, Greta? Yeah.
Correct, Gayatri. I'll also try and start typing my answers in the box. And what we should have mentioned as well, we can easily keep track of the questions and also send an email after the webinar with the replies in written form.
Thank you. We also have a question from Chitup Lama that talks about OPDs, DPOs working in urban areas, and they would like to know how does the GDS play a role in addressing the gap between rural and urban situations in which persons with disabilities live, and if we have any. If we have any resources or data on that, that's something we can discuss or share as well.
Thanks so much, Gayatri. If that's a question for me again, I think it would be valuable to also hear from our speakers in terms of their experience with these topics. The aim of the GDS is precisely to play a role in identifying and addressing these gaps. So I'll also be happy to look at whether we have existing resources or if there are specific commitments submitted in 2018 and 2022, which specifically address this topic.
Thank you. Yeah, again, we have quite a few questions, and panelists, you're also welcome to answer them on the box. You will be able to type your answer in as you can, and it, everybody will have access to the answer as well. Right. So we have a question about working with youth with disabilities, and I think we have some specialists here on our panel who can speak to that. I'm sorry, Arman, you have your hand up.
Gayatri, I was wondering if all the speakers could finish their, talk, and then we can take all the questions. Will that help?
Sure. We can do that. Yeah. All right. So the question and answer box is open. Please leave your questions there for us. And as and when all our speakers finish, we can come back to your questions. And as Greta mentioned, all of your questions are being recorded, and we will be able to reach out to you with your with responses as needed. With that, I would like to welcome our next speaker, Devi Datta Acharya ji. Devi Datta Acharya is a seasoned disability rights advocate with over 22 years of experience in promoting disability rights through facilitation and consultancy on the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the Sustainable Development Goals, and national policy. He has 7 years of experience in disability inclusive development with CBM Global, 5 years in inclusive education with Handicap International Nepal, and a decade in inclusive livelihood programs with both CBM Nepal and Handicap International Nepal. In leadership roles with the National Federation of Disabled People, NFDN Nepal, and the Disabled Empowerment and Communication Center Nepal in Banki, he provides technical support and engages in advocacy at national, provincial, and local government levels. Acharya ji, over to you.
Okay, thank you, guys. Namaste to all. I am Devi Datta Acharya from Nepal. Also, our admin manager, Mr. Loyal Prasad is also with me. Now, I would like to share the presentation. Yes, sir. Okay. National Federation of the Disabled Nepal is an umbrella organization representing organization of persons with disability across Nepal. Founded in 1993, NFDN advocates for the rights of persons with disability through awareness at capacity building, networking, and collaboration. It plays a key role in disability inclusion at the federal, provincial, and local levels, representing over 400 affiliated OPDs nationwide. The organization follows principle of good governance and advocates for achieving disability targets.
Acharya ji, I'm sorry to interrupt. We need you to speak just a little slower. The service providers are unable to catch up, and so we don't have interpretation anymore. Could you please speak just a little bit slower?
Yes, thank you for.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
NFDN is key player providing technical assistance to the government of Nepal for the enactment of disability inclusive policy, act related to the rights of persons with disabilities through its countrywide network. NFDN carries out human rights campaigns and standing OPDs and foster disability inclusion across the country. NFDN collaborates with government bodies, INGOs, and different civil society stakeholders, private sector, including key partners like FFO Norway, DPOD Denmark, CVM Global, Handicap International, the Asia Foundation, My Rights, UNDP, etc. It provides technical assistance on policy development and is involved in major national government structure. NFDN has achieved substantial success in achievement of its commitments in GDS, particularly in its inclusive approach to promote the representation of most marginalized groups, including all types of persons with disability and those from underrepresented groups. This approach has proven effective, and the NFDN efforts have been pivotal in engaging the government to implement policies that lay the groundwork for continued positive impact for persons with disability across Nepal. NFDN assisted the government in upholding its commitment to the CRPD at the federal, provincial, and local levels, focusing on CRPD monitoring and prevention of serious report, improving accessibility, and ensuring national standards aligned with CRPD guidelines. And again, enhance access to justice for individuals with disabilities and contributed to the harmonization of law and policies related to the justice and accessibility. Furthermore, the reliable disaggregated data has been generated, which is instrumental in influencing policies, programs, and budget planning with the efforts of NFDN and its countrywide network. The government has endorsed National Policy on Rights of Persons with Disability 2021, National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Authority, developed Gender Equality, Disability, and Social Inclusion Policy. Simultaneously, province government has been formulating policies, and NFDN is advocating for making disability inclusive development plan.
Sorry, Acharya ji, to interrupt again. Sorry, we are having difficulty with your audio. Could you please speak into the mic and a little slower if you can? Thank you so much. Thank you.
NFDN efforts to achieve GDS commitments, capacity building of OPDs, government and other stakeholders, conduct project to build the capacity training on CRPD monitoring, advocacy, good governance, participation and representation with support from FFO Norway and DPOD Denmark, CVM Global, HI and other partners. Training focus on legal education, human rights, education, right-based approach. Second, advocacy for inclusive education. NFDN has submitted agenda to revise the education law and policy and advocate to influence the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology and Inclusive Education section to revise the examination and evaluation system and make it flexible enough for persons with disabilities. Advocacy for inclusive health. The Ministry of Health and Population has made various policies, strategies, and guidelines for the health.
Sorry again for the interruption. Acharya ji, we please need you to speak just a little bit slower and more clearly into your mic. The interpreters are unable to follow. I'm really sorry.
Okay,
It's just
advocacy. Yes, yes, thank you. Advocacy for inclusive health. The Ministry of Health and Population to influence the Ministry of Health and Population at federal level, and again supported to disseminate all the policies and guidelines among the stakeholders from federal to local level. And advocacy for the inclusive livelihood, and again works with private or corporate sectors to increase the placement of persons with disabilities in the formal sectors job market through consultative project. Inclusive disaster risk management and climate change advocacy to make the relevant policies and act disability inclusive like ZC policy. Raise awareness on disability inclusive disaster risk reduction. Relevancy of NFDN's commitments during GDS 2025. The CRPD monitoring report of NFDN has highlighted gap in policy and its implementation. Understanding of CRPD of the government structure, capacity of OPDs for advocacy, the stakeholder on giving priority on disability issues and implementation of plan in various thematic areas such as education, health and rehabilitation, economic empowerment, DRR and climate change, and also access to justice. Thus, has planned to advance its advocacy initiatives to achieve SDG targets. Therefore, is planning to bring new commitments during SDG 2025. NFDN is in the process of consulting with its members, organizations of persons with disability, and entire network to bring the new agendas in consistence with GDS 2025 overarching themes and general priorities. Strengthening advocacy in federal, province, and local levels. Disability inclusive DRR and climate justice. Humanitarian support to persons with disabilities and rights to food. Promoting inclusive education. Capacity building of organizational persons with disabilities. And next, good governance and inclusive development, promotion of good governance within the organization and promoting disability inclusive plan, disability responsive budget, and local levels through state structure. And it will further collaborate with OPDs and like-minded organizations to bring its commitments as well as push government to express commitments in GDS 2025. Thank you so much.
thank you, Acharya ji, for first of all sharing the tremendous work that NFDN is doing, specifically in so many thematic areas that are so closely aligned with the pillars of GDS, especially GDS 2025. Thank you for highlighting your work on inclusive education, inclusive employment, budgeting, in the areas of gender inclusion, as well as for highlighting the significance of cross-sectoral collaboration, which is an essential strategy in order to bring bring success to these well-coordinated actions. So thank you very much for sharing that with us today. Our next speaker is Ms. Pratima Gurung. Pratima Gurung is an academic activist and indigenous woman with disabilities from Nepal, focused on advancing intersectionality in the disability rights movement. Since 2011, she has championed marginalized young indigenous women with disabilities, promoting cross-movement collaboration in Nepal, Asia, and globally. Pratima is a faculty member at the Padma Kanya College, where she links academic research to advocacy issues, such as climate change's impact on indigenous peoples with disabilities. As an expert on the Disability National Direction Committee under Nepal's Ministry of Women, Children, and Senior Citizens, she influences policy development. Pratima is also the founding member and current General Secretary of the Indigenous Persons with Disabilities Global Network, as well as the National Indigenous Disabled Women Association Nepal, NIDWAN. Pratima, we are so happy to have you with us, and we can't wait to hear what you have to say. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Gayatri. Thank you so much for all these introductions that you have set forth. So I think I am audible. Good evening and indigenous greetings from Nepal. I'm Pratima Gurung. I represent Indigenous Persons with Disabilities Global Network, and thank you International Disability Alliance for organizing this historic preparatory meeting prior to the summit and giving me this opportunity to share the experiences and remarks on it. Today, I'll be speaking on the behalf of underrepresented groups from an intersectional lived experience. That is why my presentations today will focus on three aspects. First, to share about the Global Disability Summit, informations from an intersectional and underrepresented groups. Second, my engagement in the first Disability Summit in 2018 in London, and second Disability Summit in 2022, with the issues of collective campaign representing on behalf of organization of people with disabilities. Third, the commitment of GDS and its implementation, the follow-up at the regional and the national level that collaborates with the Global Disability Alliance and also the Global Disability Summit. With these settings, the Global Disability Summit is it's a global mechanism that improves the lives of people with disabilities, especially from the Global South, created in 2018 to convene the global, regional, and national stakeholders. It aims to galvanize the global efforts to realize disability inclusion around the world. It is a mechanism that brings together a wide varieties of high-level stakeholders engaging and discussing in the progress of disability inclusion, where governments, multi-stakeholder agencies, private sectors and public sectors, academia, civil society organizations, and organizations of people with disabilities and their foundation. That is why it is unique. To share about the GDS, I would like to highlight that Organization of People with Disabilities was at the heart of the summit in 2018. One of the significant features of the summit is it highlights about intersectionality. It celebrates the disability diversity, which mainly focuses on underrepresented groups, primarily focusing on impairment and the social identities based on sex, age, ethnicity, religion, reason, social and minority, other categories groups. These groups are still left behind within the disability movement and within the other marginalized movement. And those peoples include people with intellectual disability, deaf, blind, psychosocial, autism, people with albinism, women and girls with disabilities, young people, indigenous and other minority groups, which voices and meaningful participation and engagement was centered to highlight the issues in the past. That is why we're looking forward that this should continue in 2025 as well. As myself, I was a speaker in both the first and the second Disability Global Summit. Focusing on my lived experience of the summit, I just wanted to highlight that underrepresented groups and the mainstreaming approach was critical. The summit had opened the conversation to define the terminology like underrepresented groups. Who does that group belong to? And it has further expanded the global narratives. And this has highlighted the global emerging issues like climate change, conflict, disaggregated data, inclusive disability budget, and it has opened several other avenues among the stakeholders and right holders. Second, the collective engagement of organization of people with disabilities, holding side event, prioritizing the agenda and the issues for discussions, having engagement with multi-stakeholders. And when I say multi-stakeholders, it includes families, society, development partners, UN agencies, public and private academia, and also it has held formal and informal discussions and meetings with the member state and stakeholders. It has also built the relation of people with disabilities for a mainstreaming disability inclusion, and which is one of the very crucial component of the GDS. Today, we are able to amplify our collective voices with our collective aspiration of leaving no one behind and nothing about us without us. Today, we are proud to share those lived experiences of the past GDS. We are setting our narratives, and that narratives for us is we are looking at the paradigm shift, a paradigm shift from an underrepresented group's voices and concern. Third, the commitment of the GDS is an implementation. It's a follow-up at the global, at the regional, and at the national level. It has made all the right holders, all the duty bearers to exercise their rights, take responsibility, being accountable to implement the international and national commitments and also the normative framework like the UNCRPD. The concluding observation, when we look at the Asia Pacific region, we have the Indian strategy, we have the sustainable development goals with leaving no one behind. There are so many commitments, and if you look at the perspective from women and gender intersections, the Beijing Platform for Action, where we are reviewing the 30 years of the Blazing Platform for Action, where women and girls with disabilities and their diversity plays a very critical role. And in this context, our government of Nepal has done this commitment in 2018. I remember our minister was present in London at the time, and she has made a commitment. And when I say she has made a commitment, it is a commitment from our government. It is a commitment from all the stakeholders, including people with disabilities from those respective countries. So I would say that it has opened avenues for conversation, sitting on the table to discuss on the issues that affect our life as a person with disabilities and as a person belonging from underrepresented groups. And by this commitment, today, the government of Nepal, the member states, they have allocated a starting disability responsive budget at the country level. If you look at these achievements, you can see those achievements. And with these achievements, we see that there are 1,418 commitments that has been done for the growing concern. And this is a time to look at those commitments. This is a time to critically rethink, to replan, and to reframe our narratives from our concerns and our voices. So looking at this agenda at the global level, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Disability Inclusion Agenda in 2025, and the discussion that is happening at the country level, at the local level, at the federal level, it's very much critical. And today we see that there are 4 pillars that has been set for the GDS. We would like to urge the issue of inclusive education, meaningful and participation, meaningful participation, inclusive budget, and there are many, many other issues that is connected with underrepresented groups, sexual health and reproductive rights, climate crisis, humanitarian crisis. All these are very much pertinent issues that is connected with our lives and our realities and our challenges that we face. So coming up to this summit, in the upcoming summit, we really want to include the voices of the underrepresented groups, people from the bottom, people from the rural areas whose voices are still from the global south perspective. And we would also like to see the effective and meaningful participation in setting these priorities. I think the summit in the past and the summit in the future will set a triangular relationship between the right holders, duty bearers, and multi-stakeholders for achieving, for celebrating these achievements, the gaps, and the forward for the solutions for making our rights real in our day-to-day realities. We know that we are solutions to all the crises, to all the challenges, and to all the realities that we face as a person with disabilities. So with this note, I just want to thank all of you for listening me, and I would like to hope to answer your further queries. Thank you for listening me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pratima. Thank you for highlighting so many essential, sorry, so many essential things that we need to be talking about. Thank you for highlighting what are the specific needs, especially at the national level, especially for underrepresented groups. Thank you so much. Sorry, we're just having some technical difficulty. Yes, sorry about that. Thank you so much, Pratima, for your remarks, and I hope that your remarks will set the tone for some of the questions that we have been getting, especially about many of the aspects that you have talked about. Disability responsive budgets, talking about meaningful participation, and everything else that you've talked about. So I hope that some of our questions will be answered by your speech, and we are also getting more questions as we speak. I'm going to invite everyone to take a 2-minute sensory break. We are having a very long webinar, and our service providers have worked tirelessly. So just a 2-minute break, after which we shall resume. Thank you. some of the very relevant things that Pratima brought up, including the importance of monitoring and how tracking mechanisms are relevant to all stakeholders across local and country and global levels. And thank you also, Pratima, for talking about the Nepal government's commitments, as well as the 1,418 commitments made from Nepal on concerns that are relevant to the country context. So thank you for that. And with that, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Yusra Gilani. Hi, Yusra. Our final speaker, Dr. Yusra Gilani, has been a dedicated youth disability inclusion advocate. She is a psychosocial counselor and a healthcare professional with a doctorate in pharmacy from the Rifa International University in Islamabad. Honored in 2021 with the Khadijatul Kubra Award by the Women Parliamentary Caucus and UNFPA for exceptional leadership and advocacy as a young disability inclusion advocate. Yusra has participated in various international platforms, advocating for creating inclusive opportunities for young disabled individuals through awareness, education, representation, capacity building, psychosocial support, and financial empowerment, including at the International Disability Alliance, British Council, UNFPA, Voice Global, and IFES. Yusra was selected among 75 women peace architects who have undergone training under the SHE She Peace Builder project by Search for Common Ground and completed a project on peace building. Her deep understanding of healthcare needs, combined with her international experience, have equipped her with a global perspective and innovative approaches to youth advocacy. And she is here today to speak with us about the importance of the inclusion of youth-specific initiatives, especially in the context of the GDS. Over to you, Yusra. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gayatri. Hello, everyone. It's truly a pleasure to be here today. So I will be discussing today the Global Disability Summit and youth priorities. So youth with disabilities are among the most marginalized groups in the world's youth population, and they face severe social, economic, and civic disparities compared to those without disabilities, even in developed countries. For many young people with disabilities, exclusion, isolation, lack of educational, economic opportunities are daily struggles. The Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, are making strides towards a greater inclusion of youth with disabilities in society and development, as well as towards the realization of their human rights. As countries continue their efforts towards poverty reduction and equitable development, it's crucial that youth with disabilities are offered equal opportunities to take part and contribute at all levels of society. So, inclusion is essential because it empowers youth to become leaders, advocates, and change makers and representation in decision-making process. Being a young person with disability in Pakistan remains a financial, administrative, practical, and somehow emotional challenge. Transitions such as moving from school to work or becoming independent are already very difficult for many young people. But they become even more discouraging due to fragmented support system. For young women with disabilities, this is compounded by gender discrimination, and it often leading to violence, mental health issues, and misconceptions about their capabilities. So in Pakistan, OPTs are working to empower persons with disabilities, but there is less specified youth-focused agendas. Some OPTs offer capacity building programs focused on leadership skills and even on different collaborative activities are occurring for youth. For more comprehensive progress, we need to collaborative activities to target youth in key areas such as leadership and representation. The government is making efforts, although through diverse methodologies, to improve the position of persons with disabilities. However, there is a still long way to go. The government must create inclusive platforms for youth consultation and policy making to ensure their voices are heard. In employment sector, there must be inclusive hiring practices, reasonable accommodations, and a proactive approach to eliminate barriers. Too often, even when youth with disabilities have the qualification, they face discrimination in hiring due to accessibility issues and sometimes due to disability stigma. In education, while progress have been made with different policies, like in Pakistan, HEC's policy for students with disabilities, but much more needed to be done. The infrastructure improvements and accessibility measures are still essential. So the government must also strengthen the implementation of existing disability laws with clear accountability frameworks.
जुन डिसेबिलिटी छ तिनीहरूको क्वालिफिकेसनमा पनि उनीहरूलाई चाहिँ
There must be commitment in areas such as inclusive
Excuse me.
education.
Sorry to interrupt, Yusra. I think one of the interrupters is speaking into the English channel. Sorry, but it's creating a disturbance.
Yes,
Sorry,
we
Yusra.
have Amina on English channel at the moment. Amina, can you hear us? Yeah, all set.
Sorry, it's not me. I think it's Zarka, my colleague.
Should I continue?
Right.
एकजनाहरूले बोलिराख्नु भएको रहेछ त्यही भएर बिचमा रोकिएको छ अहिले सुन्न सकिराख्नु भएको छ म हैन मेरो साथी बोलिरहेको छु र अगाडि
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can everybody hear that we are on English channel? And
this is Nepali interpreter. I think my co-host is...
I can hear Yusra just fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please continue, Yusra.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Okay. In Pakistan, extreme weather events like flood, heat waves have devastating effects on persons with disabilities. So we need to be included in disaster risk reduction strategies and climate resilience efforts. Similarly, political representations, cultural and sport activities must include young persons with disabilities. So we need to advocate for young people with disabilities by engaging with government institutions, OPDs, and key stakeholders to minimize the challenges we face. I also want to highlight the GDS mechanism. This is a powerful tool that stakeholders can use to make and track commitments towards inclusion, working collaboratively across areas such as inclusive education, employment, climate action, and disaster preparedness. So all stakeholders, including the private sectors and international partners, can use this mechanism to contribute to the inclusion goals. So, to truly achieve the global commitment of leaving no one behind, young people with disabilities must be in leadership positions in institutions and policy making roles. We must have a seat at the table making decisions that has an impact not only on our lives, but the lives of all citizens. Make sure young voices are heard because without the participation of young persons with disabilities, we cannot build the inclusive world we strive for. So, in that, I will say that together we can create a future where the daily lives of persons with disabilities are enriched, empowered, and equal. Thank you so much. This is from my side.
Thank you, Dr. Yusra. Thank you for highlighting some of the more youth specific areas and thematics that should be of relevance, as well as highlighting some of the steps that have happened in Pakistan and what is yet to happen. So thank you for presenting that for us. Again, I see some, thank you, Yusra, and I see some hands raised, and I request audience members to please put their questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. We are now going to go into an interactive part of this webinar, and we request all our audience members to please participate in some of the activities that we have set up. I request my colleague Alexandra to please run the first poll question that we would love for our participants, our panelists to respond to using the Zoom platform.
Yes, we
So
started.
thank you, Alexandra. So the Zoom platform should have presented to you a quick poll that asks the first question: were you involved in the implementation of commitments? And you have two options: yes, no. So the first question was, were you involved in the implementation of commitments? Yes or no. The second question asks, to what extent do the commitments reflect regional priorities? So to what extent do GDS commitments reflect priorities in your local context, in your regional context, in your national context? And you have three options to respond: to a small extent, to a reasonable extent, to a large extent. The third question on our poll reads, how confident do you feel about your understanding of the GDS mechanism? So how confident do you feel about how the Global Disability Summit works? The options are not confident, somewhat confident, confident, and very confident. We will allow the poll to continue for a few more minutes, just to encourage all of our participants to please respond. And after this poll, we will have another question that allows a lot more discussion. And hopefully we will be able to hear from some of our participants who have joined us today. And of course, we will hear from our panelists as well. right? Just as our participants are responding to the poll questions, and I can see the percentage of participants is gradually increasing. About 50% of everyone here has responded to the poll. Thank you very much. I request our panelists to please open the Q&A box, and if you find a question that you would like to respond to, and if you would like to state any specific examples, please do to take this time, if you can, to respond to any questions. I guess we have a question, Pratima, about what specific initiatives does the GDS implement to facilitate the participation of Indigenous peoples and other marginalized groups? How do you ensure that their contributions are not only welcomed, but also prioritized in discussions?
Should I have to respond, Gayatri?
If you want to, you can respond, or if you would like to give us a response later, we can always get in touch with Deepika Lama, who has shared that question. If you are able to answer, you can let us know now or later.
Yeah, just because there are also other questions that is related not only to Indigenous, but also the intersectional marginalized identities. So I just wanted to reiterate and re-emphasize about the past Global Disability Summit, which has really prioritized the voices of the underrepresented groups. And I hope this upcoming 2025, that is GDS, will also enhance the meaningful participation and engagement of underrepresented groups, which includes Indigenous, rural people, also people from Dalit communities, also from different impairment groups like deaf, blind, psychosocial disabilities, and other impairment groups. So I think there is a process. The process starts from the national level, the regional level, and the global levels. And there are also mechanisms to submit your submissions. But at the same time, I just have to also inform that there will be also different side events that will be hosted by different organizations of people with disabilities. Also, I think collaboration, consultations is the process to engage them in a very effective way. The other kind of informations can be informed and updated by Greta. Over to you, Gayatri.
Thanks, Pratima. And Greta, would you like to add something to that?
Yes, and thank you so much, Pratima, for starting this conversation. To add to what Pratima mentioned, we're also looking at specifically holding a webinar very similar to the one we are holding today. It will be on the 28th of November. And in that webinar, we will be specifically addressing Indigenous groups of persons with disabilities and persons with disabilities from rural areas. So we really hope that that webinar specifically focuses on the issues and concerns of these groups. It's also been a specific and ongoing effort of IDA to include these groups in all of the consultations that we've been running over the past 2 years, and that have informed the teams and priority areas of the GDS. And finally, on a more practical level, we are actively advocating so that any funding towards physical participation at the summit also specifically reserves a quota for indigenous persons with disabilities and people with disability from rural areas. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Greta, and thanks, Pratima. There are a lot more questions in our Q&A box that if any of the panelists would like to respond to. Specifically, I think, Yusra, we have a question from Nishrishta, and their question is about how have you as a youth panelist been engaging in your country or region to amplify the voices of youth with disabilities, and what are your priorities for the GDS Youth Summit, and they would like to understand how to collaborate. Would you like to speak about some of the work that STEP has been doing, Yusra?
Thank you so much for this question. Yes, in STEP, we have recently developed an youth disability inclusive hub, a small committee in which we have engaged with different youth persons with youth with disabilities. And I think the most important thing that we can do in our country level is by advocacy, and through awareness campaigns we can sensitize persons with and we can sensitize even the general population about disability. And similarly we can do some youth leadership programs as well. STEP is conducting some youth leadership programs, and through these programs we are highlighting the opportunities that youth with disabilities can avail in future as well. So I think a lot more will come in future as well. And about GDS, I think this webinar is very important, and with these webinars and about these, we can get more knowledge about this. And thank you from my side. This is.
Thanks, Yusra. And really, like we mentioned at the beginning, the objective of this webinar is to increase awareness and share information about the GDS itself. And again, it's essential that we recognize that the GDS mechanism is something for us to participate in. And the summit itself does not offer solutions. It is the commitments that all the stakeholders make at the summit that ultimately lead to the success of the mechanism. And so really, for everyone who is asking questions about what the GDS is intending to do about specific thematics, it's important to recognize that engagement in events like these with your local OPDs is really your method of participating and putting forward the priorities for the GDS. All right, so let's look at our poll. Thank you. We have 60% of our participants have responded. I'm just going to call out the current results. So we asked, were you involved in the implementation of commitments? And 52% said yes, and 48% said no. We asked, to what extent do the commitments reflect regional priorities? And 54% said to a reasonable extent the commitments at the GDS seem to reflect regional priorities. 32% said to a small extent, and 21% said to a large extent. And the last question is really feedback for us to understand the effectiveness of this webinar and see how we can increase engagement. The question was, how confident do you feel about your understanding of the GDS mechanism? And 42% said somewhat confident. 29% of you seem confident. 23% not too confident, and 16% said you are very confident. So thank you so much for responding to those poll questions, and the poll will continue to run as we continue our webinar. But I'm now going to ask one question, and we hope that we are able to get a lot of participation on this question. The question is, what are examples of commitments that you think should be submitted at the Global Disability Summit in 2025? A lot of you have raised very pertinent areas that need to be worked on in your questions. So we would request you to share with us some examples of commitments that need to be shared. And alongside that, we request you to tell us who should submit them. I am going to share the question on my screen for those of you who are more visual to read the question. So the question is, what are some examples of commitments that you think should be submitted, and who should submit them? I encourage you to please use the chat box to respond. And as time permits, we will take 5 responders from the audience. What are examples of commitments that you think should be submitted at GDS 2025, and who should submit them? Which stakeholders do you think should submit these commitments? All right. I request you to please raise your hand if you would like to speak. And as time permits, we will be happy to hear from our participants. All right. We have Smita, and then Smita Sadasivan, and then Sharan Krishnan. And then Tuikang.
Hi, am I audible?
Smita, yes, you are, Smita.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So my key request would be to ask for political participation of persons with disabilities that should be ensured in all the countries from the local level, local bodies elections as well as the parliamentary elections. And apart from that, we need to have reservations and nominations for persons with disabilities, because this will actually enable the capacity of persons with disabilities, which is a huge stigma right now. And it will also lead to ensuring other rights, especially the living independently within the community and coming up with strategies. So my take is for political participation and followed by independent living. Thank you.
Thank you, Smita.
Yeah, I would like.
Yeah.
I would like women with disabilities and women with disabilities from indigenous groups or from high support needs to submit this at the GDS. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Smita. So it's very in line with what Arman spoke about. Political participation is our need of the hour. Thank you so much, Smita. All right. We have Tuika. I'm going to.
Unmute ako, bro.
We can hear you, Tuika.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Okay. Yeah, in my opinion, because as with the panelists, Sister Pratima Gurung has also shared the participation of women with indigenous women with disabilities is very less. So we will like to, give more space for indigenous women with disabilities because our voices is unheard mostly because there is and at the same time we need to build up women with disabilities leaders so that we could bring the ground realities of our own issues and challenges, and we could that would be discussed in the platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Tuika.
And also we would like to engage because recently in Manipur we have experienced conflict violences, and at the same time there is the floods and landslides in this very humanitarian crisis, emergency and risks, where indigenous persons with disabilities were most vulnerable with the unprioritized and unaccessibility in different ways with the basic daily needs and all, and also with the vast where the relief camps and all we are not accessible for persons with disabilities at all. This type of issues and challenges also we would like to bring up. So we need your support. This is also what I would like to place once again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tuika, and thank you for bringing up the important aspect of disability inclusive disaster preparedness, as well as disability inclusive climate action. And we have a response for you from Arman on the chat. He says that he's offered support, and please do get in touch with him to take this further. Thank you so much, Tuika.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Thank you. I guess Abhishek Kumar, you have your hand raised.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Abhishek from India. So basically, I would like to share 5 pointers with respect to that demands that need to be addressed there. First is real-time and disaggregated data, because when we are talking about data, it is not just the disaggregated data. We also need the real-time data. So with respect to the last speaker is saying about evacuation during conflict or disasters or climate change, we also need the real-time data based on AI technologies or GIS and so on. Apart from that, many of the speakers also reiterated, but as I am also working on the same, so I want to say disability-led and inclusive climate action and DIDRR. The third point is climate resilient, because many of the people also talk about political representation. So we also need to ensure that political process is also climate resilient, universally accessible and inclusive. Because let's say in this year when we were having general elections, it was in the peak of the summers. So we need to be heat resilient elections as well. The fourth is insurance for person with disabilities with respect to their climate vulnerability. and disability adjusted life year. So WHO has this concept that life we are losing because of our disability. So we need to get insurances for losses and damages during the disasters and conflict and so on. And the last is the crime against person with disabilities, how they are being vulnerable for sexual exploitation, discrimination and so on. So we also need to include that bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Abhishek, and so well articulated. Thank you. Especially regarding your point about insurance. In fact, I know that NCPDP recently worked on disability inclusive insurance in India. So thank you for bringing up such relevant points. I also want to ask you, especially with regard to your point on real-time data and the usage of technology. Who do you think is well positioned to make such a commitment within the GDS mechanism? Would it be?
Actually, I'm working with the NCPDP itself. I'm a NCPD Javed fellow myself.
Okay,
we have already working on that, but the research bit, but we lack a lot of the time with the technological assistance that, somebody from the technology sector who are, expert in those domains. For example, there are organizations like ISRI, who is only working on the GIS, and they can provide, real-time data and so on. Apart from that, Indian context, ISRO is becoming very important because they have this remote sensing and GPS type real-time locations of the person with disability. So just like the UNCRPD, which under the Article 11, it does mentions the conflict and disasters, but it omitted the climate change. So similarly, even in the Indian domain, we have Section 8 of RPWD Act, which does mention about conflict and emergency situations, but it doesn't mention about climate change. So we need the policy change and then collaboration beyond the disability sector. We need to work with the technology sector who may not have on the prima facie anything to do with disability, but they can offer something that is very critical for us. Also, you referred to the insurance part. There also we need to go just beyond the disability sector and collaborate with people. Like the budget was referred by many people. So when we're talking about the climate action, insurance and everything, the budget going to be the most critical thing that we will be arguing with the government or the other funders and the organizations at the national as well as the international level. So that will be the key. Last bit that I want to add, in this process, the participatory climate action or the approach should be crucial, because we just can't be top bottom approach. We need to be going to the ground, use the traditional knowledge, traditional indigenous knowledge. We have Pratima, who was from Nepal, referred to the indigenous communities. So we need to learn from their traditional knowledge and how those can be used for ability, climate resilient infrastructure. There are so many architecture in different parts of the world that is climate resilient, so and universally accessible as well as inclusive. So we can try that as well. So participation at the local level will be the key. Thank you.
Thank you, Abhishek. Thank you for elaborating. Next, we have Nir has their hand up.
So much because it is getting punctuated here. This is Neeraj Shrestha from Nepal, currently working as the program blinded. So what I from different stakeholders, first could be in the context of education in Nepal, but we do not have the guideline yet. That's why it could be like formation and implementation of the inclusive education guideline for the children with disabilities could be one that we can seek from the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology. That's the one thing. And, on the other hand, that the government has not properly worked for the inclusive education of underrepresented groups, including autism, intellectual, deafblind, and other severe disabilities. So that could be another commitment that they will allocate a specific, they'll do the best for the inclusion of children with underrepresented groups to access them in the regular education. Third could be like talking about the health sector. So we need to ask the government to ensure disability friendly, or let's say inclusive and accessible health services for all, including persons with disabilities, and where we can ask them disability inclusion in their all the service provider trainings, because so far, if we review the training manual, they have not highlighted the person with disabilities or disability inclusive aspect at anymore. That's why seeking commitment to include disability inclusion part in across their training manuals and programs could be another commitment that we can seek from Ministry of Health and Population. Another that we can seek is like in Nepal, the political participation of person with disabilities is very minimal, as well as the electoral system is not accessible. So we can seek the commitment to ensure the electoral process should be inclusive and accessible for all, including persons with disabilities, as we are coming our next election within 3 years. That can be another commitments that we can seek, and this is the time that they have been working on the bill of political parties and election bill. So this is the time that we can see commitments. And finally, what we can seek is that not only from the government stakeholders, but all from the CSOs or the development partners, that their programs will be inclusive. We can ask them to reserve, or we can ask them to ensure or to apply the LNOB or leaving no one behind across their programs, so that, and they will be assured the inclusion will be the cross-cutting issues across their programs and the projects. And final agenda could be like, if we see the government websites of Nepal, they are not much accessible. So being very specific, we can ask them to make the provision, making all the government or public websites and digital platforms will be accessible at
important things, but especially building capacity of service providers, as well as emphasizing the role that is played by mainstream organizations that don't specialize in disability. So thank you so much for bringing that up. We have time for one speaker, and Ravi Ganesan, you've had your hand up. Thank you. If you could speak just for 2 minutes, just because of the want of time. Thank you.
Yes, please. My name is Ravi Ganesan. I am based in India, Bangalore. And one thing we see is I focus on the education of children with disabilities. Though we have a right to education, we see that the education of children with disabilities is very much ignored. Technically, we have not had a census for almost the last 2 years. 20 years or something like that. With such a framework, we don't have the actual children of disabilities, how much they are there. It is not there. As a policy matter, India has got all government, we are at par at the global level. But when it comes to the implementation, we lag very much behind. So my request is not just the signing of the convention or making of the policies, but for its implementation, we need to have a proper system in its implementation, beginning with the right to education. Then we can look at employment and other issues. But in India, it's a massive country, and and education is a major issue. And for education of children with disabilities, that's a very major issue. Until and unless this is addressed, we cannot think of real progress. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ms. Ravi. And this inclusive education as a priority is one that we hear in almost every consultation. So thank you so much for that. And we, just for lack of time, I have to apologize to Andre as well as Deepika. And if you don't mind, if you can put your interventions in the chat, you know, I will be very grateful, simply because we only have a couple of minutes left. Thank you for all of these very concrete suggestions that we have taken record of, and will definitely add to the agenda as well. I would like to take a couple of minutes to thank all of our panelists who joined us today and made time for this in their very busy schedules, and shared valuable information with us about participation in the Global Disability Summit. I would also like to share at this point that we continue to do these informative webinars. Since we are doing them globally, we are trying to localize them to regional time zones. So we will continue to do these webinars, and if you follow our socials, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc., you can definitely try to join one that is of a convenient time to you if you would like to continue these conversations and you know, participate in these discussions. Thank you very much. I'm just also would like to share that there is the Global Disability Summit newsletter, which you can sign up for by going to the Global Disability Summit website. I'm going to request my colleague Greta to please, she has put it in the chat already. Thank you so much. The link to subscribe to the GDS monthly newsletter is in the chat box. So if you would like to stay in touch and continue to engage with these mechanisms, please do subscribe to the monthly newsletter. And thank you so much for joining. I'm going to request the panelists to stay on for a minute after the closing, just so that we can take a photograph for our records. Thank you everybody for joining. It was very nice to interact with all of you today. Thank you for participating, and we look forward to engaging with you repeatedly on different topics and in all the upcoming webinars for the GDS. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye. See you next time.
See you. I'm going to request just the panelists to please turn on your cameras if you don't mind.
The camera is off from your technical team. Could you please
1 second, please. How about now?
Yes.
Oh, great.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. And please, thank you. If you could just look at the camera, I'm going to take a screenshot.
Okay.
Thank you. 1 second. I'm just waiting for Mr. Arman. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you so much. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the service providers as well as IDA Logistics for making this happen. And thank you so much for your time, everybody. It was great to have you.
You were fantastic, Gayatri. Very well conducted. Thank you so much.
Indeed, Gayatri, thank you so much for leading on this. Well done.
Yeah, how are you,
Thanks,
Greta?
guys. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Greta and Gayatri, both of you. Well
Thanks
done.
to all of you.
And looking forward having more discussion.
Thank you everyone. Thank you, Gayatri.
Thank you.
So-
Thank you all. Thank you, Yusra.
So
Thank you.
Greta
Pratima.
and Gayatri, you will be in touch with me regarding the other particular concern, isn't it? The discussion that
will
is
be.
going. Yeah. Let me know, Greta.
Yeah.
Thank you. Gayatri, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.